All right, guys, it's Friday, day 2577 on my bike to work challenge. And I wanted to share with you a story today, a patient story that I've recently seen. And they have been on a quest to lose weight. And about a year and a half ago, he decided to go on a carnivore diet. For those of you who are not familiar with this essentially means that they eat almost only meat or animal products, no plant foods, no carbs in its most extreme form. So he was able to lose with this diet quite a bit of weight. He went from an all-time high of 230 some pounds to 190 at his last visit. But his previous weight was on average around 220s. So 30 some pounds, almost 40 pounds loss, which is pretty good. The other good thing is, prior to this weight loss, he used to be pre-diabetic. His blood sugars were elevated. He reversed his pre-diabetes. He lost close to 40 pounds. He feels a lot better, exercises regularly. And it's all good, right? Well, not so fast, because when we checked his lipids, his total cholesterol went from a prior level in the 180s to 407. His bad cholesterol, the LDL, went from 120, which is a decent level, to 316. And also his HDL went up from, like, I think it was 51 to 77 or something like that. So these are some massive increases in his lipids, in his cholesterol levels. And these are significant because, one could think, well, if he reverses diabetes, lost all his weight, blood pressure improves, he feels better, he exercises more, what could go wrong, right? And, I commend him for his ability to stick with this regimen for almost 2 years now. It's not easy to avoid all carbs for a couple of years, right? But the question here is, with those lipid changes that I mentioned, what would that do to his cardiovascular risk? Well, we have studies showing, in fact, it's a rule that we healthcare practitioners follow. Anytime somebody's LDL, or the so-called bad cholesterol, goes over 190 milligrams per deciliter, that in itself becomes an indication to use a high-intensity statin, a cholesterol-lowering medication, to reduce the risk of heart attacks and strokes. And the reason 190 was chosen is because we have studies showing that in people who have cholesterol levels that high, the cardiovascular risk is really increased. In fact, according to at least one study, the level of increased risk when you compare people with familiar hypercholesterolemia, meaning they have an inherited propensity for their cholesterol to be high and their LDL is over 190, compared to people with cholesterol levels below 130, you can see a 5-fold lifetime increased risk of cardiovascular events. And in the same comparison, for the high cholesterol group, the age at which the first significant cardiovascular event happens, whether it's a stroke or a heart attack or something similar to that, is 10 to 20 years earlier in men and 20 to 30 years earlier in women. So for this patient of mine who's in his early 50s, we are looking at some significant odds, increased odds of cardiovascular events. And it's not a small thing, What good is it for somebody to reverse their prediabetes and to lose weight if they suffer a heart attack or a devastating stroke? So I had a talk to him. I shared some of these things that I told you, and we decided to reintroduce gradually, so he doesn't feel overwhelmed, some plant foods, starting with the vegetables. They are rich in a lot of good vitamins, phytochemicals, minerals, and low in calorie, and relatively speaking, quite low in carbs. Even some of the vegetables that some people may think are less high in carbs. For example, tomatoes, on an average sized tomato, not a cherry tomato, but an average sized tomato like a little apple, you can get about 4 grams of carbs. Whereas in an average apple, you can get 25 grams of carbs easily. So again, vegetables are a great class of foods, are a great food group to include in one's diet when you try to lose weight. And it won't ruin your carb balance if it's something that you're concerned about. The same is true, to a good extent, of the berries family. Now here in the Northern Hemisphere, in May and June, you have a lot of berries ripening up, strawberries, and then you have the raspberries. And also, blueberries will come on later on. These things are amazing. They are not just powerhouses of nutrition packed with phytochemicals, disease fighting, cancer preventing, even dementia preventing phytochemicals. But they are, relatively speaking, low in carbs and very tasty. So he agreed to include these things, start to include these things in his diet, and I'm hopeful that this will make a difference, not just in his lipids, but in his overall health and risk moving forward. And I gave you this story to illustrate the importance of balance, of choosing the right way to do things. Because like I said, he put a lot of effort into going 0 carbs for 2 years. But I think, as a nutritionist, as a physician, I do think that that effort could have been spent better with a much more balanced, plant-based, or mostly plant-based diet. Anyways, I'll talk to you next week.